Okay, you're all set.
Okay, wonderful. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I call the meeting of the February 8th Seattle Planning Commission to order. I'm going to start off with a land acknowledgement. On behalf of the Seattle Planning Commission, we'd like to actively recognize that we are on Indigenous land, the traditional and current territories of the Coast Salish people who have lived on and stewarded these lands since the beginning of time and continue to do so today. We acknowledge the role that traditional Western-centric planning practices have played in harming, displacing, and attempting to erase Native communities. Commit to identifying racist practices, and strive to center restorative land stewardship rather than unsustainable and extractive use of the land. We'll start off with some announcements for our visitors and members of the public. Welcome. We are happy to make all commission meetings open to the public. Please do note, though, that the Planning Commission does not hold public hearings since the commission is an advisory body. We provide recommendations to elected leaders that in turn make the actual decisions. We encourage individuals and organizations to provide their comments appropriately. Obviously, this meeting is a hybrid meeting with some individuals participating remotely, while others are participating in person in the Boards and Commissions room at Seattle City Hall. And I did not, I think we can move on to the color brave space norms. I did not ask someone before the meeting to think about one of these and be ready to reflect back to the group how this one that you select relates to the discussions that we're having today. So I'm just going to pause here to see if somebody wants to pull one forward and talk about how they think it relates to the agenda items that we're discussing today.
I will venture if my fellow commissioners allow me to talk about green. Look for learning and commit to learning in public. By the way, this is Julio Sanchez, he, him pronouns. And I think that's one of the most important things we can do in the commission to be humble and be open and be available to learning and to do it in a public way so we can embrace new knowledge for our good and for the good of the work that we do in the commission.
Thank you so much, Julio. I really appreciate you volunteering. Sorry to put you on the spot there. Thank you for being brave. If there are amendments or modifications, I suggest we all agree to these norms. On today's agenda, staff in the Seattle Department of Transportation will join us to provide an update on the Seattle Transportation Plan. And then after that, the Seattle Planning Commission staff will walk us through our strategy for reviewing the draft comprehensive plan. And we do have quorum, so I think we can start next with approving the January 25th, 2024 meeting minutes. Can I get a motion and a second to approve those minutes?
David will so move.
Julio seconds.
Wonderful. And are there any changes or amendments? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed? Any abstentions? And with that, the January 25th meeting minutes are approved. Moving on to the chair's report, the next Land Use and Transportation Committee is next Thursday, February 16th. Is that right, Vanessa? 15th?
15th. Sorry.
February 15th.
My typo.
From 7:30 to 9 a.m. And that meeting will be held online using the MS Teams platform. I think Robin just sent out a notice requesting RSVPs, so please reach back out to her with whether or not you plan to come. And then our next full commission meeting is scheduled for Thursday, February 22nd from 7:30 to 9 a.m. And that meeting will be held online using the MS Teams platform. Vanessa, do you want to provide some announcements and commission business updates now?
Sure. Thanks, Michaela. As Michaela noted, Co-Chair Michaela noted, this is a hybrid meeting. All of the commissioners are participating via MS Teams, and staff and a member of the public is here in the Boards and Commissions room of City Hall. During the meeting, there will be opportunities for questions and comments from commissioners, and we will be using the chat function of MS Teams for all commissioners to join the discussion queue. So if you could note your name and the general issue or topic that you have a comment about, that would be helpful. And just a reminder that the chat function is not intended for a substantive discussion, because members of the public don't have access to that. It's really more of an organizational tool for us to help facilitate a hybrid meeting. So those are my announcements. I do have one item of business that I want to propose to commissioners to think about, and then we'll loop back. I'll invite you all to let me know your thoughts either right now, or if you want to think about it a little bit, by email. At the conclusion of our retreat earlier this year, several commissioners had the idea of committing to holding an in-person commission meeting once a quarter. So the way we would hold that, if all commissioners were amenable, is we would still have the opportunity for members of the public to call into the meeting and listen, but we would ask all planning commissioners to actually arrange to be here in person. I got some feedback from a number of commissioners that being able to participate in person in the retreat was a great opportunity to build relationships, especially as a number of you were appointed to the commission during the pandemic when there wasn't an opportunity to meet people face to face. So the co-chairs and I are proposing that we meet in person for the March, June, September, and December commission meetings, the first of the month, which is the same time as this one, from 3 to 5:30. That's the second Thursday of those months, and every month. So I welcome any initial thoughts you all may have right now, as well as if you want to think about it and just send me an email. Again, we would start that if all commissioners are amenable at the March full commission meeting, that is an afternoon meeting, that it will be on the 14th of March. So I will put those names in the chat. Thank you for that suggestion. And just to say it one more time, the months would be March, June, September, and December. So I will put those months and the day in the chat. And we do have a few minutes before getting into introductions. So if commissioners have any initial thoughts, either just speak up or put your name in the chat and I'll call on you. And again, please give it some thought if you don't want to necessarily respond right now. And I will put those dates and months and dates in the chat. And with that, I will turn it back to Michaela for commissioner introductions. And then I believe our guests have just joined us, so we will be ready to get going. So Michaela, please start.
Okay. Good afternoon, Michaela Daffer. I use she, her pronouns. I live in Capitol Hill and I work in affordable housing policy and planning. And I am going to turn it over to the co-chair of the commission, David.
Thanks, Michaela. I'm David Goldberg, the co-chair of the Seattle Planning Commission. He, him pronouns. I live in the Wallingford Urban Village and I work for the State Department of Transportation, and I'll pass it to Julio.
Hello, everyone. My name is Julio Sanchez. My pronouns are he, him, and as of now, I just completed an assignment evaluating grants for the Department of Health. And when in Seattle, I reside in the Capitol Hill neighborhood. And I will welcome somebody else to take the initiative and introduce themselves.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jamie. I use she, her pronouns, and I live in the future 130th station area and work in climate change and environmental justice. And I'm passing it on to the next brave soul.
Hi, Andy Dannenberg, live in Northeast Seattle, he, him, and teach at University of Washington. And glad to hear Julio was working on health-related grants. Next, Radhika.
Hi everyone, I'm Radhika Nair. I use she, her pronouns. I live in Wedgwood in North Seattle, and I'm an urban planner. And I'll pass it to Monica.
Thanks, Radhika. Hi, everyone. My name is Monica Sharma. I use she, her pronouns. I live in the Central District, and I work in advocacy and organizing around equity in physical activity for young people in Seattle, King County. And I will pass to Rose.
Hi folks, Rose Luchila, Whitson, pronouns they, them. I live up north in Licton Springs and I work as a professional wetland scientist and permitting specialist with Jacobs Engineering. I'll pass to Caleb.
My name is Caleb, he, him pronouns. I live in the Central District and I'm an educator. I will be passing it on to Nick.
Hello, everyone. Nick Whipple, use he, him pronouns, live in North Del Ridge in the West Seattle neighborhood. And for my day job, I am a city planner. I think that's all the commissioners. Is that correct, Vanessa?
That's correct, Nick. Thank you. How about we'll move on to staff. Olivia?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Olivia Baker. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm staff to the Planning Commission. John?
Good afternoon, I'm John Hoy. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm staff to the Planning Commission.
Good afternoon, everybody. You've already heard from me, but I will now introduce myself. My name is Vanessa Murdoch. I'm Executive Director for the Planning Commission, and I use she, her pronouns. And with that, back to you, Michaela, and our guests from SDOT are on the line as well.
Okay, I think first, should we check in with the public commenter to see if they want to provide public comment now? I just did, and they've opted to not at this time, but perhaps at the end. Thanks, Michaela. Okay, wonderful. It's so difficult being in a different space and not being able to see folks' body language. So thank you. All right, well, welcome Radcliffe and Jonathan. We're so glad that you chose to come back and present to us. For those on the call, Radcliffe Dakanai, is that how you say your last name?
Dakanai.
Dakanai, I'm sorry, Radcliffe Dakanai,
Okay.
and Jonathan Lewis from the Seattle Department of Transportation are joining us to provide an update on the continued development of the Seattle Transportation Plan. We have an hour for this agenda item. And Radcliffe and Jonathan, if you could just leave 30 minutes for questions and comments, that would be great. I'm sure this group is going to be engaged in this topic. Following their briefing, I will facilitate our discussion with Vanessa's help. And as she's already said, please note in the chat function of MS Teams the topic or issue you wish to address in your comment or question. And Vanessa will assist me in monitoring the chat and grouping comments and questions by topic. All right, with that, I turn it over to staff.
Great, thank you so much for having us here. And I'm here with Jonathan Lewis, who is one of the project managers for the Seattle Transportation Plan. And I will just share my screen, if you'll bear with me one moment. Okay, hold on one second here. All right. Can we all see that now? All right.
Yep.
Great. So Jonathan and I are here to give you an overview of the Seattle Transportation Plan and how we've responded to the comments that we received from all of you. So thank you again for taking the time to share your comments on the draft plan. And we'll be going over those, but right now I just want to give you a quick update on our timeline and what we've heard. So we received comments back in Q4 of 2023. November 20th, we ended the final stage of public outreach, and at the end of November, December, and through this month of January and up to now in February, we've been working with all of the comments that we've received and determining the appropriate edits to make in the STP and for the next iteration. And we're looking to release a mayor's recommended version to council sometime later this month. And again, just to recap, we've got this STP in two parts. It's an overarching plan in part one with the vision, goals, key moves, and updated implementation strategy. We've also added a chapter in there of how we integrate with the comprehensive plan. And then in part two, we have all of the functional elements and then have a deeper discussion on how the network integration works and how we address modal conflict. So those parts are addressing some of the comments that you made to us. And then a little bit about performance measures. We have some top tier and middle tier measures in the STP. And then so just like this wedding cake, we've then got a bottom tier set of more detailed measures that won't be in the STP, but we will also be tracking. So in the top tier, we've got some high level ones like emissions reduction by 2050. And then another level down where we go into a little bit more detail of how we're tracking some of the work that we're doing. So like 100% of households live near AAA, that's all ages and ability bikeway. And then, like I said, the bottom tier, those are going to be living with the different programs at SDOT and will be tracked that way. And we'll be tracking them separately as part of an asset management process. All right, we'll just jump right into some phase 3 outreach summary, public review and comments on the draft STP. We received over 1,400 comments, received some long form letters as well, and feedback from the modal boards. We've taken all that and woven that in to the STP. Some of the high level themes, STP generally headed in the right direction. We want to be more bold and actionable and be fast. Make sure these are, we need to make these changes to achieve our goals sooner than later. Really focus on safety, equity, and here including accessibility and sustainability goals in particular. And we heard a lot about elevating freight and economic vitality, and I think you reflect that also in your letter. We didn't have as much detail initially on the implementation, so we heard, we need to have a little bit more about that and give further detail, and we've done that now. And then, of course, finalize the performance metrics, which we've done. And so how we're responding, just again, high level before we jump into some more of the detail. We've developed and expanded the implementation strategy. So there's a whole strategy, whole chapter that is definitely expanded relative to the draft. And we've added some key moves to address safety and equity comments. And then we've increased the number of implementing actions. So from around 140 to closer to 180, 190 to support all of those key moves. And then to respond to the economic vitality needing to be in the plan, we've revised the narrative to include sections to highlight the importance of economic vitality, but we did stop short of adding an economic vitality goal, and I'll talk about a little bit more of that when we look at your comments. So I've got about another 10 or 15 slides here to go over your comments, and I'll try to get through them as quickly as we can so we can have a conversation. And so first one being include more explicit goals and performance measures, targets, and implementation dashboard. Your comment around clearly state prioritization framework and implementation strategy, updates to the performance measures. We've done that in the implementation strategy in Chapter 5 in this updated STP. And then around the prioritization framework in Section 2 or in Part 2 of the plan, that first introduction has a more detailed conversation about the prioritization framework. And we have updated our performance measures. And like I said earlier in the earlier slide, we got some high level performance measures and middle tier performance measures related to each of the modal elements. Integration with comprehensive plan. Needing to coordinate our transportation planning better with the comprehensive plan, align the STP, final growth strategy, and integrate the STP with the comprehensive plan to make sure that we're creating great places. So throughout this whole process, we've worked really closely with the comprehensive plan team. Certainly, because of their delay in release, we still continue to work with them, and even with the changes that we are anticipating or have been working with through them, we've aligned the concepts with the forthcoming final strategy, and certainly continue to push for more of a multimodal mix of transportation options that complements the growth strategy. Around prioritization framework and recommending an equity-based framework and supporting reprioritization of the right-of-way for active transportation and transit investments over private vehicles. And then similar to the top bullet of addressing multimodal transportation in underserved low-income communities. Just wanted to reiterate here, equity remains one of our top goals and is certainly part of our prioritization process. Active transportation and transit investments, certainly key to increasing safety, reducing VMT, curbing emissions, and promoting equity. We, throughout all of, from bike, people spaces, PED, and transit, we have enhanced key actions around that. And then throughout the document, really the ethos is around a multimodal, expanding that multimodal mix of transportation improvements. And we have a list of projects that represent improvements that are proposed in the underserved parts of the city. Multi-lane arterials. You all had a list of recommended strategies, which we looked at and considered, and then of course concerns about negative and environmental health consequences of arterials, needing to do more research around that. So just to say that we've got language that says right here, prioritize safety of all people on city streets, including arterials. We've got key moves around rebalancing, excuse me, rebalancing street space to support multiple essential functions. And then from your list, promoting effective movement of goods and transit that share general purpose space on streets. So thinking about freight as well, and looking at also freight opportunities, excuse me, thinking opportunities for freight and bus to share a lane to give opportunities for freight to move freely, but also take advantage of the opportunities that we're doing with enhancing transit movement. And then, of course, we'll need to do additional research on the environmental and health consequences. That was not, fully fleshed out through this planning process, but we'll continue to do that as part of other processes going forward. Safety and Vision Zero. Hearing some comments around including priority projects to meet our Vision Zero goals and the urgency of Vision Zero, and then recommending to make Vision Zero a standalone chapter in and of itself, and then also addressing equity concerns related to safety and low-income BIPOC communities. I'm going to say that Vision Zero is woven tightly throughout the STP. I mean, one of our top goals, safety, the tagline is lead with safety. So that's woven throughout the document, and we've integrated comments, among those 1,400 that we received that amplify safety, and again, woven through each of the elements as well. Speaking to safety. And here, just a quote from the document that we would be focusing on delivering safety interventions with demonstrated effectiveness in locations where they are needed most. So addressing equity concerns related to safety. And then climate change and resilience. Comments around include programs and projects that address critical environmental sustainability issues, again, related to equity, focus on the most affected and vulnerable communities, then identifying policies and projects to address extreme heat across all modes and systems, and then de-emphasize transition to electrification on the citywide transportation network. Again, like safety and equity, climate action is one of our pillars. SDOT will certainly continue to partner with Office of Sustainability and Environment, CLCD Light, Planning, Community Development, and Public Utilities, and among other city departments to address the totality of our sustainability issues. It doesn't all lie in SDOT, but we'll be working with our partners to make sure that our addressing critical environmental issues are addressed in totality. From the equity perspective, equity again will be continue to be a central practice at SDOT. We've been working closely with our transportation equity framework team and our transportation equity work group, which are members of the community, to help us guide us in our decision making around making decisions around climate with respect to equity. And we've integrated comments, especially from SPU and other groups speaking to resilience. So some comments around being able to address against extreme environmental events. And then we've, I think, done a better job of balancing our discussion on electrification. We've heard from the community that it isn't all about electrifying trucks. So we've included language in the document about ensuring that it's also about transition to clean energy options, but also emphasizing that it's also our mode shift. It's continuing to do walking, cycling, and use of transit. So we need to do all of these things to make sure that we're going to be achieving our climate goals. And then around economic development, and we heard this from others as well, other groups, that we needed to include an economic development as a goal, and then emphasize how the SPP can help build wealth and improve quality of life. And as I mentioned earlier, we did not add an economic development or economic vitality goal specifically, but we did amplify the conversation around the importance of economic vitality, transportation's importance to economic vitality, and we've woven that throughout the document. In part one, we've really strengthened the conversation around economic vitality and making sure we support that, and then how each transportation mode contributes to the economy, we've included a discussion in each of the elements as well. And then specifically the freight element, we've strengthened the discussion around supporting the economy, the supply chain, and all the comments that we received from the freight community around how freight is really important in ensuring the economic vitality of our city. Freight mobility, I've covered that just a little bit right now. So include strategies to integrate freight with other modes, prioritize corridors for combined freight and transit, and include strategies that allow for innovation in urban mobility. So we've just done that. We've upgraded the freight element to better integrate with other modes. So we've heard conversation of making sure we also separate freight infrastructure from cycling infrastructure to focus on the safety as well. So we've done that. We put a spotlight on freight and bus lanes. So again, the opportunity for freight and transit to utilize limited right-of-way space. Then also elevated our conversation on e-cargo bikes, and then potentially using smaller vehicles in appropriate settings for our last mile delivery as part of innovation in urban goods delivery. And then repurposing the right-of-way, prioritize repurposing the right-of-way for people-oriented streets, continue to explore the benefits of additional parking management strategies. We've incorporated this feedback into our pedestrian and people space and public space elements of the plan. So even those two pieces really speak to spotlighting our need to think of more people-oriented streets. And then we've got language in the document and about exploring low pollution neighborhoods. And just wanted to announce that we're already beginning to do some of that work. We'll probably be coming to you in the near future to talk a little bit more about low pollution neighborhoods and how we would be implementing that as part of the mayor's executive order. And then as part of our VMT strategy, we'll also continue to explore parking management strategies to help manage where we want parking to happen, how that parking coordinates with the comp plan and our growth areas, and also a way to manage or limit inducing driving into particular parts of the city. Last couple slides here. Anti-displacement. Comments around include proactive strategies to prevent and mitigate impacts of displacement. So we've included conversations here in the STP around providing and supporting low-cost access to transit and affordable travel options. And then we continue to work closely with our regional partners to expand transit, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in our final slide. And then again, we've been working closely with comp plan to address displacement from the land use perspective and how transportation and that land use connection supports providing increased access for people who have been displaced out of the city, but also thinking about how improving sometimes parts of the city can lead to displacement in different areas. So more of that lies within the comp plan relative to the STP, but we've been a part of the anti-displacement conversation in our work with the comp plan team. And then finally, regional coordination aligned with PSRC's Vision 2050 and continue ongoing coordination with the regional transit agencies. So we certainly are continuing to do that. We have dedicated staff who work with our regional partners. In our group, we have folks who are dedicated to work with PSRC. We've certainly taken a look at the Vision 2050 and have been mindful of how that layers into the STP and also with the comp plan as well. And then we also are working closely with Sound Transit and King County Metro to work with them to improve our overall transit experience. here in Seattle, and we have dedicated staff working with both of those groups. We have a whole division at SDOT who are leading the planning and coordination with Sound Transit on our ST3 light rail expansion work and station area planning. And then we also have staff in our transit mobility division who regularly work with King County Metro. So you can be assured that we'll continue to coordinate with our regional partners as part of improving our overall transit system experience here in the city. And then just to cover some next steps, we're continuing to finalize our edits and be responsive to comments that we've received. There were a lot of them, and so trying to balance them as well, making sure that the story that we're telling is resonating with our administration and that they're okay with presenting it to council later this month. So later this month, February 2024, we'll be transmitting the mayor's recommended Seattle transportation plan to the council, and then also similar time publish the final EIS. Afterwards, council will deliberate and then decide when to bring the STP for adoption and vote with an accompanying resolution, and there'll be opportunity for public hearing and also public review again of the document at that time. And later in 2024, as part of the levy, we'll have more clarity on our transportation funding landscape. And then beginning in 2025, we'll begin developing our first set of more detailed implementation plans of a division that's coming out from the STP. All right, that is it. I hope I've given enough time for all of us to have Q&A.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Radcliffe. If you, now is a good time for you to start putting your name and topic into the chat box so that we can group our discussion into some order. While we wait for people to do that, to virtually raise their hands, I'll just say how appreciative I am of SDOT's willingness to come forward to this commission several times throughout the development of this plan and kind of be transparent with the work you're doing and be receptive to feedback that you're getting from us and other members of the public. So I feel like this feels to be like a true iterative process of plan development where you go and you put some stuff down on paper and you bring it out and you shop it around, and hopefully the product that comes out at the end of it is one that's better than where you started. Okay, maybe I can get started with a question on timeline. Is this our last touch with you on this plan? It seems like it moves into a political process now, and it would if we had further comments, it would be appropriate to direct those to council. Is that correct?
I'm going to pass that one to Jonathan.
Okay.
Yeah, that's correct. The next step in the public processes will be transmitting the mayor's recommended plan to city council. From a ongoing STP implementation, I mean, I'm sure we'll be back to engage with you all as topics advance. But in terms of from here to adoption, that's right. Okay. It becomes a council-led process in a few weeks.
Okay. We have our first comment or question from Julio.
Hello. Thank you so much for your presentation. Could you maybe give a bit more detail about what I understood that you said that it resurfaced that electrification should not be a priority?
We we balanced the comment was that we shouldn't just focus on electrification as the panacea to climate. And certainly in past administrations, there's been a focus of push electrification, electrification, electrification. And I think you've seen all these comics where all of the microphones are all about electrification and no microphone for cycling or transit or for walking. And I think just to tone down or de-emphasize a little bit on the electrification piece related to our climate actions. Electrification will still be part of the solution, but also cycling, walking, and transit. We need to do both, and it sometimes seems counterintuitive, but I think part of this is, we can't all change all at once to the ideal situation. People are still going to need to drive, and if you're going to drive, might as well be electric. And I think we're in line with the state's rules around what kinds of vehicles will be sold here by 2035. So a transition away from gasoline vehicles, and then the state rules around by 2035, only electric vehicles will be sold. So there still will be a role for automobiles, but we also have language in the plan of how we need to reduce VMT and also how to increase more cycling, more walking, and riding transit as well. So there's much more of a balance, I think, as we try to address the climate challenge that we're in.
Okay, I'll do a quick follow-up to that, and I should say that as somebody that doesn't know how to drive, I have never learned, partly because of fear of driving. So I am wholly dependent on public transportation and walking. Those of us that walk and those of us that take public transportation, we're probably doing that already, whether because we have to or because that's what we like to do. And I certainly don't think that technology is going to solve our problems, but it's interesting to hear that point of view. Thank you for responding to my question.
Thank you for your question.
Hey, David, you're up. David, if you are talking, you're on mute.
Okay, there's a ridiculous lag, and then I click the button again, and then I'm muted again. Thanks, guys, for being here. We really appreciate your taking the time to read the comments and to talk to us about how you've addressed them. It seemed like there's a few big asks that we had that you gave some attention to and spoke about in your report, but didn't necessarily act on. And the first one that's sort of one of the biggest ones to me is that we asked you to clearly articulate a multi-lane roadway strategy, noting that it's the place where most of the serious crashes, deaths, and injuries occur, that those are disproportionately among people of color in our more vulnerable communities, that they're the source of delay for our high-frequency transit, which we're trying to get more people to use by having better and more convenient service, that these are the areas that have also absorbed most, the lion's share, and then some of our growth over the last 25 years over our previous growth strategies, and that these are the corridors that you yourselves have identified as the place where not everything fits. And so given that this was the plan to integrate all the modal plans and sort of resolve some of those issues, it was striking to us that there's not an articulated strategy. Like, these are the ways we're going to think about prioritizing. These are the kinds of moves that we're going to make to address these specific issues associated with those arterials. And here's where you're going to see how you track progress and how we hold ourselves accountable. So I still feel like that isn't maybe in the plan, but maybe I'm wrong about that.
I think it's a little bit of both. And I'll just say a little bit of something and then I'll have Jonathan weigh in. This plan wasn't intended to address every specific arterial. And I think every arterial is going to have specific issues. So, you know, Aurora is going to have different than Rainier. And last night when we were at the bike board, the levy team was there also. And we were talking about how when we go in to address these issues on arterials, we're going to be much more focused on what those issues are. And so the prioritizations are going to come at that project development level, because I think the issues on each of these arterials are fairly different, even though broadly they're all around safety, but the responses are going to be different, even from Rainier to MLK, just because of the different needs on them. Parts of Rainier don't have a major freight truck route. They do on MLK, and then it changes a certain way up a little bit more north on Rainier. So I think part of that we have at more of a high level around what we want to see, but not the detail I think that the commission is asking for. And Jonathan, if you wanted to add a little bit more on that.
Yeah, thanks, David. Appreciate the feedback. I think when I initially read your letter, I had to read that section a few times because I felt like the plan substantially did focus on multi-lane arterials, and so we did discuss a lot of ways we could potentially respond. Ultimately, through the key moves, through the priority investment networks, and through the policies that are pretty clear in the comp plan that accomplish a lot of the things y'all had highlighted, we feel like we've got very good coverage on the topic of tackling our multi-lane arterials. But happy to
so I'll just
further if you know. I think the next steps are into the project development process. I think is where we go from here, as Radcliffe's highlighting.
Yeah, quick additional feedback. There was, you know, as Radcliffe says, you're taking a piecemeal approach. You're doing it project by project, as little pieces of each arterial, and then trying to figure it out as you go. I don't think there is an overarching strategy, and I don't see it in the document that we reviewed, and I'm not hearing it described here. I think, yes, you have a lot of elements that go to and that touch on what happens in the arterials. The way you're making the decisions, and I do think you need one for each of the key. There's a high injury network that you're supposedly working on for Vision Zero. There's numerous ways that you could shape a strategy and articulate how you're going to deal with these places that are accommodating more of our population, where more people need to recreate, where people are more likely to be hurt, and where we're trying to shove more stuff through there. I think if an integrated multimodal plan isn't looking at those corridors, and I can't see in this vast plan exactly what your strategy is and how you're approaching this, then I don't think you're actually accomplishing that. So anyway, that's you know, my editorial observation.
Thanks for that comment, David.
Yeah, and I don't think David's alone. That did sound like a pretty consistent bit of feedback that was coming from several people who reviewed the plan on our end. So, you know, just take that as a suggestion that while it might make sense to y'all how it's all knitting together, it might not, in the communication of that, it might not be super clear to others, or it may, you know, demonstrate that there is a weakness in the plan that needs to be addressed. I was next, and I guess that, you know, David's feedback kind of was sort of going to be mine, where in your presentation, you had labeled a lot of things as how you incorporated feedback. And I think in some of those instances, all you did was tell us how the plan had already included things around the issues that we cared about. And so my armchair observation as you're going through some of the slides was me feeling like you had a little bit of an insufficient adjustment to the plan based on our equity and our health comments. And so I was wondering if you could go back to either of those slides and just walk us through which comments were you just pointing out things that were already in the plan versus changes that you made in response to our feedback. It might help me understand how much of a change we can expect with the plan.
Okay, bear with me one moment.
Yeah. Some of those slides were earlier on in the deck.
So let me know when I hit the one that.
Yeah, I know. It's like where is the equity one? Where's the public health one?
Oh, while Radcliffe's pulling
Maybe
it up,
here. Maybe
I can highlight a few of the equity updates. I mean, we have as y'all may be aware, a transportation equity framework that is really well done in our view, and we tried within that are about 140 pretty concrete actionable strategies for the department. About 80 of those we've been able to advance in the Seattle Transportation Plan. So we have done a complete crosswalk of the plan and tried to daylight that more clearly and show where we are advancing the work that was like a 3-year effort to build the TEF. Second thing that folks pointed out, one of the gaps in the plan was on enforcement and our relationship with SPD and trying to move towards more equitable forms of enforcement, more non-punitive forms of enforcement, and so we've added a new section in the plan that's focused on that, a new key move on that. So Radcliffe, now this is up, I can hand this off to you, but those are two that come to mind that were a big focus of the past few months.
Great. And then
slide where you talk about needing to further study public health impacts.
Right. I don't need to find a slide, but
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes.
It sounds like we're kind of punting that activity to something where we're going to pass the plan, maybe study it some other time.
The analysis for the impacts of health and as you noted, aren't part of this plan, but as mentioned in the tiering of the metrics, we're working with our asset management group right now to be able to tell that story of what those impacts are of all of the things that we're doing at SDOT and putting that against an equity lens of who is being impacted and being able to tell that story on a much more regular basis, maybe yearly or every other year, to be able to show what the impacts are of our different programs at the city. So we will have that health lens or equity lens, if you will, but it won't be necessarily reflected in the high level goals of the STP, but more of our programmatic look at all of the metrics and then through a storytelling with our asset management group.
Okay, and Vanessa put some links in the chat. Vanessa, do you want to describe what those are?
Certainly, just as Radcliffe and Jonathan referenced the transportation equity framework, I just put a link in the chat for members of the public listening in. If you just do the old Google thing, Seattle Department of Transportation Equity Framework, you'll see the framework there. And then I also added a link to the members of the Transportation Equity Framework Work Group, one of whom was our former Get Engaged Commissioner Dalton Owens. So.
Oh, okay.
Great, thank you, Vanessa. I appreciate that.
Matt Hutchins is a member of the commission who joined late, and he's telling us that his mic is disabled. But Matt, if there are any, there we go. Are you able to speak now?
Check, check.
Yay. All right. Not to put you on the spot, but do you want to engage in the discussion, or do you want some, are you just observing?
Just catching up here.
Okay, okay,
Thank
wonderful. Sorry, do other folks have questions or comments? No. Okay, I'm surprised. We had a lot to say in our letter. We appreciate you coming back and sort of closing the loop with us. Vanessa has a question. All right. Vanessa, please go.
Thanks, Michaela. Technology is not my friend today. So I was wondering, Radcliffe and Jonathan, if you know, and you may not know, but I'm curious how the iterative nature of developing and finalizing a mayor's plan to transmit to council by the end of this month is dovetailing or communicating with the upcoming release of the draft comp plan, and how is there a strategy for how to engage a fairly new council on two big plans coming out? And I don't mean to put you on the spot. I just know the commission has asked this question a long time, and since we have you here, if you have thoughts on how you might approach that both kind of education process and as well as analysis of how the two plans are going to reinforce each other, communicate with each other, and be consistent.
Yeah, sure. Great question. I mean, we've been meeting with council's central staff now regularly for a couple of years. So as the new council members are coming on board and getting briefed, their staff are well equipped to help get them up to speed. And then, as you can imagine, across SDOT and the Office of Planning are a whole series of briefings, kind of onboarding type briefings with new council members. And so those briefings are all underway. And in terms of coordination, Radcliffe mentioned we've had many levels of coordination with the comp plan team, and those continue on project management, policy, community engagement, our environmental documentation, and so forth. So we do feel really good about the level of coordination that we've been able to have with the comp plan team and policy alignment. So that will continue as we continue to work with them as they come to final and share out a draft as well. So yeah, thanks for the question.
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan. I feel like we ask that question a lot, and it's just because things do evolve, and it's something that I know that having just recently reviewed previous comments on the STP as well as the draft comp plan, it's a common theme from the Planning Commission of just wanting to know how these two plans are going to interact and be consistent and reinforce each other. So thanks for repeating what you probably said before. I appreciate it.
No problem.
And to state the obvious, it's been really difficult to wrap our heads around whether or not this plan does kind of support that vision that we have for the future, because that vision for the future hasn't been released. And so for us as commissioners, I think we sort of felt like we're taking a leap of faith. We're hoping that they're coordinated and that the transportation plan is uplifting the way that we want the city to grow. So we are anxiously waiting for the release of that, the ability to make that evaluation ourselves. All right, well, we're 15 minutes ahead of schedule. I guess that concludes this agenda item. Once again, thank you for coming, staff, and appreciate your time today and all the time you spent on the plan.
Thank you again for having us.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for all your input and feedback. Really appreciate it. Yes. So thanks for having us.
Have a good afternoon.
Bye.
Bye, thank you.
Okay, next up, Vanessa is going to walk us through the strategy we developed last year Cannot believe it has been a year. We developed it last year for our review of the upcoming major update to the comprehensive plan. We have an hour for this agenda item, which gives us plenty of time to review the strategy and modify it if needed.
Great. Thank you, Michaela. Hopefully my internet connection will hang on for dear life here. So what I wanted to do is to remind commissioners who were here last year and introduce our newly appointed commissioners or recently appointed commissioners, the strategy that we talked about last April about how we might tackle review of the comp plan. So my suggestion is that I run through it and then come back and revisit the slides if there are questions about or modifications based on what's transpired over the last year or just with new voices at the table. So next, please. So our overall strategy that we agreed to almost a year ago, was that we would create small subquorum groups of commissioners who would be able to work together outside of our standing meetings, not multiple times, at least hopefully once, to review selected elements using a framework and worksheet. That framework and worksheet we have a draft of, and I'm going to walk through it. It is definitely open to be modified and revised. I do just want to remind everybody, as well as let the newer commissioners know, that we did spend quite a bit of time teasing this out. It doesn't mean it's set in stone by any way, but do want to note that some time was taken on behalf of the commission in developing this. The idea that we talked about was that each small group would prepare a summary of their comments and then a brief presentation for the full commission, noting the key takeaways on the assigned elements and questions and comments that would benefit from a full group discussion. We organized, next please. We put forward, or you all put forward, proposed themes that each small group who are assigned to specific elements would address. So all elements reviewed would be reviewed using a racial and social equity lens, a climate resilience and climate change lens, sustainable quality of life, anti-displacement, and housing access and choice. And I'm just going to walk through some high-level questions that we have on that worksheet that was developed a while ago. The first theme under racial and social equity, the question would be, does the element under review clearly name racist and socially unjust practices and policies, past and present? And if not, what is missing? And then the second question would be, do the goals and policies of the element under review advance anti-racist outcomes? If not, how might anti-racist outcomes be achieved through articulation of goals and policies? And just as a reminder, I should have put a slide in here, but the elements that that you all had identified after backing off wanting to review all of them, which is very admirable, the higher priority or high priority elements that are within certainly the wheelhouse and subject matter expertise of this commission are growth strategy, land use, transportation, community well-being, parks and open space, climate, and environment. That doesn't mean that you all can't review the other elements and weigh in on them, but we definitely wanted to elevate those where the commission would certainly have a value add and be able to do some cross-pollination of thought between, like, hey, does the transportation element, is it consistent with and does it hold up the land use element, and vice versa, and housing? I think the Planning Commission is in a fairly unique position across the city in that this body will be looking at a number of different elements as opposed to just tackling one element with one area of subject matter expertise. Next slide, please. Next theme is climate adaptation and resilience. So the questions on this worksheet, again, a draft worksheet in progress. Do the goals and policies of this element support the creation of sustainable adaptive communities? If not, how might such supports be built into the element? Do the goals and policies of the element address ways to reduce the impact of climate change? such as reduced air quality, heat island effect, or sea level rise? If not, where might these risks be addressed? And in terms of mitigation, do the goals and policies of the element support city goals of emissions reduction? If not, where might emissions be addressed? And do the goals and policies of the element promote emergency response preparedness? Again, we can revisit all of these. I know this is a lot to take in, and I will be sending it out to you all after this meeting so you can think on it. We do have a little bit of time to refine our approach as we approach the hopefully soon to be released draft plan. Next slide, next theme. Under sustainable quality of life, the questions you all identified under health, do the goals and policies work to improve environmental justice outcomes, such as reducing exposure to pollution? If not, how might the environmental justice be considered in the element? Do the goals and policies of the element promote equitable access to open space and or recreation? If not, how might access to open space and or recreation be addressed? Under safety, do the goals and policies of the element promote a safe and comfortable environment for those who work, live, and play in the city? Consider how the element encourages walkability, repurposing the right-of-way and community-specific activation of collaboratively designed spaces. And then lastly, under sustainable quality of life, resilient communities, do the goals and policies of the element support the creation of resilient communities? Consider aspects such as access to essential daily needs, access to opportunity, and capacity building and technical assistance to support self-sufficient neighborhoods and communities. Next slide. Our fourth theme, and these are not in order of importance by any means, anti-displacement. Does the element include proactive strategies to prevent and mitigate the impacts of displacement? Consider housing and commercial displacement in all its forms, cultural, physical, economic, and if proactive strategies are not present, how might they be included and what might they be? Next one, please. Housing action and choice. Do the goals and policies of the element promote more housing choices in more neighborhoods? If not, what is missing that would promote that? Does the element consider the necessary coordination between elements to support successful housing growth, such as a diversity of housing choices that we spoke to that you all spoke to in your Neighborhoods for All report from 2018, such as the diversity of housing choices and supported by transportation, mobility, access, and public facilities? Again, if not, what connections are missing? And does the element consider the regional nature of housing access and encourage a regional approach to growth? If not, how might regional considerations be included? And I just want to reiterate, the idea behind these themes are meant to be cross-cutting. So somebody reviewing the transportation element would still address these questions. And some links are going to be a lot more apparent. Others may not be, but the prompt is to look for, in the various elements, how are those elements supporting housing action and choice? How are those elements supporting climate preparedness, climate resilience, etc.? I think I just have a few more slides and then I'll run back for questions. Next. So this is a very preliminary draft review schedule, and it's preliminary. You'll see it doesn't have any dates on it because we don't have an exact date yet for the release of the plan. OPC Director Kirandongo yesterday at the Land Use Committee did note that he anticipates the plan being released the first week of March. Once we have a hard and fast date, I can actually plug in these meetings. So this is just an example. And the big takeaway is that we are going to be spending, you all and we together, staff and commissioners, are going to be spending all our standing meetings, our scheduled meetings, working on an aspect of the plan. Not only the plan, but its associated draft EIS. We've spoken before about staff taking the lead on the review of the draft EIS. That does not preclude commissioner review at all, but the heft of reviewing the plan as they both are being released, which makes a lot of sense at the same time. We've talked about the best use of commissioner time is to prioritize review of the plan, and let staff take a lead on at least an initial review of the draft EIS based on comments made by this body. We're going to request over the course of the first 2 meetings, whether that's a full commission meeting or a committee meeting, requesting an overview from OPCD, the Office of Planning and Community Development, giving us over the course of either a long full commission meeting, 2.5 hours, or 2 committee meetings, 1.5 hours, a general overview of the plan. Then again, based on when this lands and our standing schedule, having the small groups meet and take their worksheet that we will revise per your input, and be ready to come back to the next full commission meeting and report out sort of highlights of your review, what either questions or comments you think merit the full commission weighing in on and being aware of as you all continue as a body to review. Then taking the next 4 meetings to discuss specific elements. Again, when we know the schedule, I'll have a better sense of how many committee meetings that is. Wanting to set aside time for specific element review, as well as those cross-element identification of overarching themes. Then at a full commission meeting within the 45-day comment period for the draft EIS, we have here approved the draft EIS comment letter. I'm sorry, earlier, together with the small group report outs, we'll also have staff prepare and present an outline of comments on the draft EIS. Approve the draft EIS within that 45-day comment period, and then present a staff draft letter on the comp plan. Take a few minutes to fine-tune those, and then approve the comp plan letter after some fine-tuning. So again, I didn't want to send out specific dates, but did want to give you all an idea of the number of meetings that we will likely be spending looking at the draft comp plan and associated EIS. And then lastly, before entertaining questions, this is just a proposal and has been modified over time based on commissioners who were on the commission last year around this time, indicating which elements they would like to really dig their teeth into in a small group setting. And Olivia, John and I took a look at the existing comp plan just to get an idea of like how many pages are each of these. So we wanted to create groups that were as evenly distributed in terms of page review, number of pages review, as well as subject matter expertise. So our proposal is that all 3 groups look at a minimum the growth strategy and the introduction to the comp plan, and that one of the groups focus on community well-being, environment, climate change. We think that's the working title name of the element. We're not sure. Parks and open space. And then that group would be Andy, Jamie, Julio, Caleb, Rose. And then have a second group focusing on housing and transportation. That group would be David, Deanna, Lauren, Matt, and Michaela. And then a third group focusing on land use that would be Monica, Nick, Radhika, Rick, and Zio. I don't really want to spend, I would propose that we not spend time in this meeting focusing too much on who's on what group. If you take a look at it and you have really changed your mind about what elements you're interested in, or your quote unquote assignment doesn't make sense, please email me and then I will put together a revised group based on everybody's, or listing of groups based on everybody's input. If possible, I think it might be helpful to have, once we get these small groups set, for there to be a preliminary meeting before the comp plan comes out, sometime the first week of March, which is today's current date. However, all of that is up for your review, comment, and modification. And I'm going to ask Olivia, can you take us up to just the 5 themes, and I'll entertain questions and comments and thoughts. So again, what's on the screen right now are themes that the Planning Commission identified last spring based on the 4 issue briefs that were released in 2022 that are on our website for members of the public interested in hearing about them. They are the Evolving the Growth Strategy, Housing, affordable housing, anti-displacement, and repurposing the right-of-way. So as we looked at those 4 themes, these 5 themes emerged as the lenses through which all review would be of all the elements that the commission identified or prioritized for review. And I'm happy to bounce around to any other slides if there are questions or comments. So Michaela has a timeline comment.
Yes, can you bounce to the timeline slide?
We can bounce to the timeline, or Olivia can assist me in bouncing. So
Yeah, sorry, it's a bit of a
shuffle.
I know we can't dictate very well or effectively OPCD's release of the plan, but if we are meeting in person, I will say that would be March 7th, right? And that would be a great time for us to have an in-person meeting with OPCD. So if they're looking for a target date and a reason to release, it'd be fantastic if we could have our meeting with them on March 7th. But
actually,
my comment.
March 14th.
Oh, it's March 14th?
March 14th is the full commission meeting. March 7th is the Housing and Neighborhoods Committee. But I will take I will note that regardless.
Okay. And then I just wanted to reflect back on my experience with some of our other letters and this timeline. Timeline's tight. When we get into the review of this, I think it's going to be a lot of work. And I think our continuous participation throughout the process is going to make it so much easier for us to adopt a letter that we can all agree on. And so I would encourage folks to prioritize attending as many of these meetings as you can, so that when you see a draft letter come forward with comments on a topic, that you're not seeing it for the first time really late in the process and really wanting to get in there and rework it. So just putting a plug in for, if you, like me, hold some of these meetings as tentative on your calendar because you're not part of that committee and you don't normally go. When we get a more official date, go in and do some calendar management, block out some time on your schedules to make sure that you can actually attend some of these, as many of these as possible, because the more of us sort of leaning in to this, the more that heavy lifting gets dispersed across the group. And we get a lot of really great diverse input into what goes in our final letter.
Thanks so much for pointing that out, Michaela. I would add to that, which was very graciously put, as the more commissioners that can participate once we flesh this out and actually start to name the specific elements. If you are a subject matter expert in that particular area and you can participate, it's really helpful. Given our short time frame and the relatively short duration of most of our meetings, that being an hour and a half, with the exception of the 2.5-hour meeting that we're in right now, the more time that we have to take bringing people up to speed of this is what we talked about at the last committee meeting and this is the direction we're going. That can be a positive to a certain extent because it is an iterative process, but it can also really bog us down if we have people participating saying, I don't agree with that at all. I mean, that's never happened, but just it's the more people who can participate, who have strong feelings about the particular areas under review, the smoother this process will be. I'm bouncing around a little bit myself. I think Andy had a comment.
Couple of quick things. One is the 60 days rigid, or do they sometimes extend it? Do you know?
Actually, the comment period for the draft EIS is 45 days. and we can request an extension, or an extension can be requested, put it in passive form. The comp plan will actually be released, to my understanding, with a 45-day comment period. And as I was working through this, I've already shared with OPCD that we will be requesting an extension to 60 days. And I don't think we'll be the only group or entity to do so.
So
is
45 to 60. Is it any chance of more than 60, or is that really improbable?
It depends on how many people request that, and you know, if the planning commission were to be the only group to request that, you know, the chances of an extension beyond 60 is less than the chance of an extension from 45 to 60. Sorry, from 40 to 65, I think we can do that. From 60 beyond, I think we start running into pushing up against the state deadline of having a comp plan approved by the council by the end of this year. And we also do start pushing up against the zoning implementation for the approved comp plan being due by the end of next June, or the state's model zoning code goes into effect July 1.
Okay, I see Radhika says sometimes there are 90-day periods. And the reason I ask is actually a little bit of a selfish one. I teach a class in the spring that does health impact assessments that will be meeting in April and May. And if we had 90 days to the end of May, my entire class could be digging through as much of this as you wanted. But, you know, that if it's 60 days, there's no way they would be done, because they'd only be halfway through the class, assuming it comes out beginning March. Now, for some reason, it didn't come out to the end of March, then the 60 days will work fine. But that's a separate issue, but I am very interested in what that deadline is, as to whether we could have a whole group of students looking at it that could get you some interesting information. Yeah, so the idea of them reviewing it, but would they accept comments at all beyond their deadline? They can review it, but it's kind of useless if no one will look at the time they spend on it. So anyway, that's an issue, and the deadline does matter on that. The other is, can you go back to that set of themes? And my concern, which you won't be surprised, is health is kind of buried, and it's a subset of a subset somewhere, rather than being a theme of the health. Yeah, I say it's a subset of sustainable, rather than health itself being a major theme. And I'm not sure why that is, but if you make it a major theme, it gets more attention. When it's buried under other things, it doesn't get a lot of attention. But I'm coming from the health world, so you can kind of expect that comment from me.
Right, I do remember there being quite a bit of conversation on how to make the themes high enough so that they captured what's important, and without burying things, but also without making the themes so dense that they became bigger than the elements themselves under review. I would expect for all commissioners to focus in on what they are, the areas of their expertise and passion, and bring that to the small group conversation, as well as to the review of all elements. We can certainly entertain revisiting the themes. We did spend quite a bit of time last year identifying them, and trying to capture, you know, at one point I think safety was a separate theme, and then we were trying to narrow down the themes so we didn't have too many themes. So I'd be interested to hear from commissioners who were part of identifying the themes last year.
Yeah, Andy, we didn't have as much public health expertise on the commission at the time. And so I think that's kind of what you're seeing. I wouldn't let the fact that it's buried under sustainable quality of life stop you whatsoever from reviewing as thoroughly as you want from a public health lens plan. I feel like it's a priority for us as a commission. It came up during that process. It's why it's here, at least as a sub bullet. But I don't think you need to worry that it will get buried in our comment letter, particularly with you on board and your interest in that area.
I also would just say that, like, in the past, it wasn't even a call out. The fact that we have like health as an explicit call out this time, I think is like huge. We have not had that kind of like really explicit. It used to be buried even further in like the description of a subset of the section, right? Like, so I think this is in itself putting a huge emphasis on it that we haven't in the past.
Thank you both. I echo those comments, and to all commissioners, if your passion is not represented as a theme or as a sub-bullet of a theme, that does not by any means mean that you can't speak to it. In fact, we're hoping you will be speaking to it. And that's one of the values, I think, of this commission, is the diversity of lived life experience as well as profession and education, that you all can bring and really have a rich conversation around your various passions and how they intersect.
We are going to lose Andy in about 5 minutes. Andy, are there any other comments or questions you have before you leave?
No, I think you're on a good track. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry, Vanessa, I know I'm not facilitating. I just jumped in. I'm sorry.
Please no, jump in. Thank you. And thanks, Andy, for your comments. Jamie just noted that before you jump off, Andy, she also saw environmental and climate justice mentioned multiple times throughout the bullets, and that is inherently inclusive of health equity as well.
I have actually looked at a number of comp plans for the health perspective, and they do vary by whether they do a separate health element or have it scattered, because it's relevant probably to most elements in a comp plan. And that's not resolved at all because it can show up either way in different comp plans.
And we've grappled with that. The last time we went through, we reviewed a major update. You had Amy Schuman from King County Public Health on the commission, serving on the commission at that time, and there was a real rich debate on whether there should be a separate public health element or whether it should be woven throughout the plan. And I think there are several of those issues that you could argue, just like what we saw in the STP, that they're going to have a Vision Zero as a separate chapter, or we recommended that and they may. So all about how you slice and dice it. I'd be interested if there are any other initial thoughts. Again, I will send out this proposed framework and structure, and if you want time to think on it and percolate, maybe even reach out to another commissioner if it doesn't make sense, or if it does make sense, either a fellow commissioner or myself. I'm all staff. We are all ears.
Vanessa,
And
I have
also,
a question.
Yeah, Jamie.
I have a question. Going back to that like timeline document, can you give us a sense of the expectation of time commitment outside of the meetings? Because I think that's really important to highlight for folks. Especially if we intend to do like, because you also said like small groups are meeting, and is that like, that's in addition to the existing meetings, correct? And then what should we expect in terms of personal review in addition to small group meetings?
That is an excellent question, one that I will attempt an answer to. I think it would be helpful once we confirm who is in what small group, reviewing what combination of elements, before the plan is released. I hate to say it though, even if it's a Teams meeting or a Zoom call and not in person, I think I would encourage you all to have, each small group to have a meeting, half an hour, and just kind of run through, hey, this is my bailiwick, I'm going to really dig deep into this part of the review. Somebody else might say, I'm not going to dig in deep to that, but I will dig in deep on this. And then sort of assign. I don't want to, I can't really give a time frame for work outside of the meetings, because some people work very quickly, some in one big chunk. Other people like to take a half an hour here, a half an hour there, a half an hour here. I think at a minimum, it would be really helpful for the small groups to meet a minimum of 2 times. One before the plan is released for a relatively small amount of time and kind of divvy up, okay, this is who's going to be the lead on this, and then set another meeting time, maybe for like an hour and a half, I'm kind of guessing, an hour to an hour and a half of sharing with each other in that small group setting. This is what my takeaways were from the review. This is how I worked through the worksheet. And we will have a staff member, if it's okay with you all, we will have a staff member attend each of the small group meetings and help synthesize, so you all don't have to do the synthesis. So that's a long way of saying, in my mind, I'm thinking a minimum of 2 meetings of the small groups. That is not a limitation, but I think it's a minimum.
And then what is the turnaround time for the small groups, considering that we're supposed to be doing small group report outs at that full commission meeting?
Again, this is subject to review, but that's one of the reasons why I thought it would be helpful to have one of the staff, Olivia, John, or I, attend that kind of that small group working session and synthesize what we hear from your various worksheets, and then kick it back to you like in short order in 2 days. And then have you all weigh in on it so that we do most of the synthesis for you all, but the thoughts are all coming from you. And then you're in a position to report out to the full commission if you're comfortable with the staff synthesis.
I guess what I'm trying to ask is, like, are we waiting until after we have a presentation of the overview of the comp plan to have those small group meetings to divvy up the pieces we're looking at? Or is that like, as soon as it's released, we can have a meeting and we can divvy that up beforehand so that we have more time?
I think it's up to the small groups, which is why I suggest if you're available to meet before the plan is released, and then based on your group and your respective personal and professional schedules, you can say, okay, I want to jump into this the day this plan comes out. I don't want to wait until after the OPCD overview. Someone else may say, I kind of need the overview to have an idea of what I'm even digging into. So is that clear, Jamie?
That's helpful. Yeah. Thank you.
I'm just scrolling through the chat to make sure I'm not missing anybody. And then I'm not disconnected from the internet. That's helpful. So my proposal is that I send this all to you, this slide deck to you tonight, and you think on it a bit. And maybe if I could get your initial thoughts and ideas, both on the overall approach, the themes, the questions, as well as the groups and the group to which you have been assigned. Sounds very school marmy, so I don't want to say assigned, but to which you've been identified with. If I could get your initial thoughts by next Wednesday, that would give me time to revise that by the 16th of February, which is a Friday, and send that out, and that would then give you all 2 weeks to meet before the earliest release of the comp plan, which would be, if it's the first week of March, the first week of March starts on March 4th. I don't know if the plan will come out. A date has not been identified beyond Director Kieran Dongo saying the plan can be expected to be released the first week of March. Does that sound like a reasonable turnaround time for you all? Matt nods. Matt's one of very few people I can actually see on the screen. David's laughing. That's not very helpful. Or not, it's helpful. It's just a little worrisome that you're laughing, David.
I just agree with Matt. Whatever facial gesture or movement of his head he makes, I'm on board.
That's a lot of power. investing in me.
All right. Well, I will turn it back to you, Michaela. If we can adjourn a little early and give you all a little more time to review. I can send this out to you right now. I'm just going to check if there's public comment. Do you care to make public comment? Sure. Excellent. So, Michaela, we have somebody. Michaela's going to say a few words, and then we'll turn it over to you, and you can speak into that. And here, come over here. Yeah, just let's see. Line the board. Michaela, we're ready for your
Wonderful. Okay.
public comment
So
spiel.
the commission provides time for public comment at all of our meetings. As a reminder, we do not hold public hearings and we are an advisory body. We make recommendations to elected leaders who in turn make the actual decisions. Individuals who make comments to the commission should remember that the mayor and the city council make the decisions. We encourage individuals and organizations to provide their comments appropriately to elected officials. With that, I invite our public commenter to offer comment. Please keep your comment to 2 minutes.
Thanks. Thank you. It's really cool to hear all the things you guys are talking about today. I think really gives me hope for the future of the city. I wanted to call out a few things that I think you guys have already mentioned and are already in these plans to some extent, but I think that reprioritizing our right-of-ways to have more bus lanes is a really important thing. And I also think that we should come up with strategies for moving up the timelines for some of these projects. I think that something like installing a bus lane on a road shouldn't be a multi-year process when you should be able to repaint some lanes in a couple of days. And I mean, obviously I'm not the one doing it, so I know it's more complicated than that, but I think that sometimes we talk about these ideas on super long timelines when they really shouldn't be. But at the same time, I think we should also be thinking very long term on some things, and I think more boldly on some things. One of the things that I've been thinking about a lot is what to do with the freeways, the urban freeways we have in this city, because I walk across I-5 every day, and the pollution that I breathe in every time I walk across that freeway is significant and noticeable. And I think that we should be thinking about how we can either shrink lid, or even consider removing that freeway in the city, along with any other major arterial. And yeah, thank you for listening, and I appreciate the work you guys do.
Do you mind introducing yourself?
Oh, sure, yeah. I am Trevor Jones. I moved here recently to be a software engineer here, and urban planning and public transportation is my passion, and I've read a lot about it recently in the last few years, and I really like the way the city's. I really am happy the direction the city is moving, and I just wanted to get involved in the process.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Agreed. Thank you very much for engaging in the public process. Before we adjourn, I'm just going to say we're going to close out the meeting, and the first thing that you could do is think about your committee assignments and email Vanessa if you're okay with them or not. And if you have any concerns about the in-person meeting once a quarter, now is also the time to let her know that. So with that, I guess our meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.